This is Claude Boudoir from CBIT and Knowledge Management, a longtime member of the Object Management Group, and right now I am co-chair of the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force at the OMG. The last meeting of the BMI Task Force was a month ago in Reston, Virginia, and on our agenda we had an introductory presentation by Professor Mark van Roosing. Because of when it was put on the agenda, we couldn't have very many attendees at that presentation, and we decided that it was of high enough interest that we should do a repeat of this presentation through a webinar, which is what you're attending right now. Professor van Roosing has a distinguished career that spans industry and academia. He has worked initially in managing ERP offerings for others, and then he was vice president and global executive for enterprise application e-business collaboration at IBM for a number of years. And since then, he's been, since 1998, he's been a lecturer, the senior teacher at Copenhagen Business School, at the IT University of Copenhagen, and most recently has been leading the Global University Alliance as professor. He has 3 master's degrees, including an MBA, and a master's from the University of Frankfurt in engineering, and a master in business economics from University College Cork. So with that combination of industry and academic credentials, Professor van Roosing has been doing very interesting work, which he's going to present to us right now, and which we, the co-chairs of the BMI task force, think is something that we need to have a connection with, or some form of collaboration with in the future. We will let you give your opinions about that through your questions or your comments later, but I will now turn it over to Mark to do his presentation. Mark, it's your turn.
Claude, thank you very much. It's very kind of you, and I am very honored to be part, to present here at the second time at the OMG, and especially around these advanced topics. I mean, there's no questions that we all find OMG and the work you guys are doing very thought leader, and obviously the standards you are developing has been a part that we are both building on and referencing, and in this case I'm very happy to participate, so thank you very much. Some of the topics that I want to talk about today is about a little bit of the background, the Global University Alliance, a little bit the way of thinking, of the conceptual context, what we do, then what do we see in the connections between architecture, business architecture, the importance of business modeling, and how this fits together, for example, some of the work that OMG does. So let's just take it through the presentations and then take it from there. So let's take the first one, a little bit what we do in the Global University Alliance. The Global University Alliance, before I come to some of the research we have done, the Global University Alliance is a community of over 300 universities. So we are researchers, professors, academics, who do research around enterprise architecture, business modeling, process modeling, service modeling, and we have done that for the last 15 years. We officially came together in 2004 to become a Global University Alliance. So this is our 10th year today that we exist as a University Alliance. So quite complex. Parts of the things that we publish, our research, we call leading practices. So it's kind of like as a reference content. It's like best practice things. So for those of you who know APQC or SCORE or some of the others in that directions, that's kind of what we do. We research things and said this is how the organizations do it, and this is hence we call them reference content. But this is what I will share a little bit. So let's start with, since we're talking today about business modeling and business architecture, I wanted to kind of show some of that research we have done to become a little bit more practical. So one of the studies we did, we analyzed the status of enterprise architecture programs in organizations. We did that actually for very, very many years. And some of these findings I want to share here. You would not be surprised that the highest maturity of the organization, so red here, that would be when the organization said we have implemented nearly all of what we will or what we need. We've implemented a very large percentage. That's more the green areas where we've implemented a moderate amount. So, for example, on the aspects of infrastructure architecture, that has one of the highest maturity in the organizations. If you put the numbers together, you will actually see that 85% of the organizations either say we've implemented nearly all we need or have implemented a moderate amount. So meaning it's quite mature in the market. Security architecture used to be higher. Now that more and more cyber attacks and other things come, we have seen that its renewed interest in the market has been really coming up, and the maturity actually has been going down. Why? Because it has become more complex. In the cloud environment, to make things more secure, it's a little bit more difficult than in a closed environment. So application architecture is actually the second largest maturity in the organizations, where actually you see it's very, very high, where it's 22% who actually feel that they don't have it or haven't addressed it at all. The rest of it, meaning 78%, actually feels they are actively working on it. Integration architecture is a little bit lower. The information architecture starts to be, that is at a level where we're saying it's close to 50% of organizations saying, well, we are addressing it, we have a moderate amount of, but there's really a lot saying this is not handled sufficiently. The one that is a big surprise for those of you who work in the area, it's not a surprise, but most executives are very surprised that the business architecture is at a very low maturity. Most organizations have not addressed it or haven't really looked at it, only have looked at small parts of it. So we have over 60% of organizations who have actually even not addressed it, only looked at its small parts. For those organizations who have looked at it, it's only 2% who actually say we feel we have a pretty good context of what we need to do. Let's take a look at what these organizations, however, said, why they are looking at these disciplines. For those of you, by the way, who are interested in all of the areas and what they said, I am happy to send you some of the findings around the research for all the areas. So let's look at the rating of strategic importance. That's exactly opposite of the maturity, meaning the business architecture, who has the lowest maturity, however, has the highest strategic importance. Well, lots of studies, lots of research in the areas. The easy answer to this is, why does this happen? Well, most enterprise architects and most modeling disciplines come from technology. We are actually too technology focused. So the answers were given was to link to strategy, improve competitiveness, link to business model. Very surprisingly, most organizations are working today with one or the other way with service model renewal. So this is not the topic of today, but very interesting. Most organizations driven by very complex organizations are mostly doing their BPM work. to improve their services to the market. Very interesting, but surprisingly, there is very few methods that interlink services with process modeling. However, this is why the organizations do it. Then to enable business model information, innovation and transformation, linked to critical success factors, meaning being able to link better to objectives and better fulfill the critical things in the organization. Then operational excellence, decision making, which also links obviously to reporting, and agility. These were the top answers of why organizations wanted to work with the business architecture. Hence our point today of linking business architectures and business model aspects together. This is our focus of today. So let's take a look of working with business architecture objects. That's a little bit of what I want to talk about right now. Now, just for the definition, just for us having, this is what we define it. I realize many have different terminology, so this is just our terminology. We understand objects to be things, entities, something that is within the grasp of the senses, and which a subject relates to. So actually just like the Oxford Dictionary defines it. A meta-object, however, and we work with meta-objects in the leading practice community. Meta-objects are entities that manipulate, create, describe, or implement other objects. A meta-object should therefore define the object's type, relation, attributes, functions, control structures, etc. What I will share with you today is some of our findings we have around business architecture, where we have identified 58 different meta-objects. For those of you who are very, very interested into semantics, object semantics, you can please feel free. You can actually go to the homepage here, globaluniversityalliance.net. Look at the research areas for ontologies or semantics. We are very heavily involved into there, so it's just in the case, and we always have some few who will say, wow, that's really a subject worthy of further study, which that's what we have done. Then what we call object groups is a generalization of a group built on common purpose, goal and aim, target, objectives and sets. We have identified business architecture to have 4 main object groups, which I will share with you obviously in this presentation. So in terms of object meta models, well, object meta model is the precise definition of the construct relationships and rules to the different objects. In this case, by the way, we call them lead objects because that's what we do within leads. And I know OMG does exactly the same thing. That's why we love the work that OMG does. You do much similar like we do. In our case, we just do it for a different purpose. You guys do it to define a certain method, a certain framework, a certain approach. The Global University Alliance and the leading practice community, we are framework and method and approach agnostic. Not that that is bad, what the OMG does. In the contrary, we are highly excited about everything that comes out of there that is agreed upon as a standard. Why? It enhances standardization and integration in the market. It's just to define what is it we do differently. Well, we kind of we study what is it the organizations do. So while the one is agreeing on principles to set a standard, we say what is it that the market does on the relationships. Does the market always do the right thing? No. Does a group always agree on the right standards? It doesn't matter how much they agree on it, it could still be right or wrong. So both can be discussed to be right or wrong. That is not our purpose of it. We have always seemed to be linking to it. It's just to say we see that meta models then are the concepts that combine the ontologies the semantic in terms of the relationships of the objects, and it has certain rules of how they fit together. This is typically what we define how they fit together. So let me share a little bit how this looks. So here is an overview. It's a very detailed one. Most business architects or modelers would find it, if you're an architect, you find it easier to read. If you're a modeler, it might, so a business analyst, it might be a little bit more different from your view. This is what is called conceptual and logical clustering. It's like classifications and categorizations. In this case, for those of you who come from data, you most likely would know, here you see here, this is where my mouse is on data, structured and unstructured data. What does that describe? It describes the data nature. In this case, it is not a classifications, it's a categorization. Why a categorization divides it into groups, while classifications, it assembles it by order. However, data components, data objects, data entities, data services, that's a classification. Why? It assembles it by order. It's like when we see over here, then you go here in process, you would have a process area, a process group, a process, a step, and activity. That's a typical decomposition. Modelers would call it levels. Architects would call it decomposition. Also engineers would call it then a functional decomposition. Could also just be seen as high granularity versus detailed granularity, meaning breaking it down to its atoms. This is what we do in the leading practice community. We actually just capture what are types of classifications, what are types of categorizations, how is it the market does it today. The community can then say how could it be done in the future, but this is typically where we would see somebody like OMG or others come in. So in the case of business architecture, you would typically, here are the groups we would have. These are value group. You remember I said there's 4 groups we have. This is the value group, meaning giving objects purpose and goals. If you remember, I'm going one back right now just to remember what a group is. A group is a generalization built on common purpose, goal, and aim, and targets or objectives and sets. So the process group groups all the processes that has the same purpose or goal around the objects of processes. Also an event falls under processes. Also a gateway falls under processes group. Why? Because it's in that area. While, for example, competencies, everything with competencies, meaning business areas, business groups, competency groups, the competency itself, capabilities are falling under competencies. Now that does not mean that a process doesn't have a capability or service. We realize that like the rest of the market, and that's not the purpose of this discussion. Then the value group. So these are the 4 groups we see under business architecture. Service, process, competency, and value. Competencies are needed for business modeling. I cannot do a business model based on my process. Why? A process is the task that I do, meaning my activities. It's too detailed for a business model. A business model has a much higher granularity. A process is too detailed granularity to be able to do a business model. So hence you would do it on competencies. While a service is an output of a process or a service output of a business function. You always have a service when you create as an output that is consumed. So we categorize things. Let's take a little bit more look at those. So this would be working with business modeling and business architecture through the value objects. These are what we call the primary objects we have identified around value modeling, meaning those that give purpose and goal for the business. So both a driver gives a purpose and goal. Hence it has been put into the group. Also forces, external and internal. The vision gives a purpose and goal. Also a mission. So these are the identified objects for value modeling. And by the way, this interlinks with value management, but value modeling is not the discipline of value management. It's two different disciplines. The one is management. It's like process management. Process modeling is not the same discipline of process management. Most would know that. The one discipline is actually using lean. The others is using a management discipline of how to govern aspects of your processes. So let's go into some of these details. Now, if one has identified such objects, and in this case we have identified lots of objects around value modeling, what can you do with it? Let me now show you, if this is okay with you, a little bit the difference, and then I'm coming back to the value perspective. So here are the ones for the business competencies. In this case, I have a business role, a business resource, a business function. I can also model cost flows, cost types, business owners. So business owners are not found on a process. We all know that would be a process owner that I find on the process. Business rules. Could that connect to a process rule? Yes. But is a business rule and a process rule something different? Yes. It's not always something different, but it can be something different. Hence, it has a different object. That's at least how we have handled it. Same for business rules. So these are the objects you would find under business competencies. This is what you would find under services. A service flow, a business service. Does services exist? Yes. This is proven by the work of what ITIL does. Also COBIT references a service. Also TOGAF references a service. OMG, and this is not a criticism, but OMG also recognize that there are services. While I still want to mention limited, for example in process work, they say only an automated service exists, not a manual service exists. But we do realize that always depends on the groups and the maturity of adapting it. And obviously process modeling is not service modeling. But these are the objects relevant to business service modeling. So let's look at the next one. This would be around processes. Process areas, process groups, business process, the steps, the activities, the events, the gateways. I could also find a data object or a business object on the process. Also, you see that in the BPMN notations, both 1.0 and 2.0 already recognize this. Then I could categorize my process according to process type, meaning my main process or my supporting process or management process. I could also view it as a process flow, meaning my inputs and outputs. What precedes, what follows. I could have my process rules, my process measurements, my process owners. So many people here, this is where it often really hits the ground. Where process work combines, where the aspects, where it touches both information modeling, service modeling, aspects of value modeling. So the process is kind of like the thing between. Processes touch most of it. Then you have objects for applications, data, platforms, and infrastructure, including, by the way, infrastructure devices, infrastructure services, infrastructure rules. Here we also see infrastructure compliance. This includes the security. Same, by the way, for platforms. As I mentioned before, security happens to be more and more a really, really big topic in the market. So let's look at the conceptual context of business architecture. What is it we see, how these organizations are applying it? So if we look at business modeling and business architecture together, which is the topic of today. So we chose a topic relevant to a little bit the study. Instead of doing it theory-based, we said let's do it subject-based. The structures we saw organizations applying is people, organizations, process, and technology. That's not a new thing. This is quite common. As a matter of fact, this is most books talk about structures in this way. Also, hence, a capability can be seen on a person or an organization or process or on the technology aspects. One could view this through the tiers, meaning the levels, the strategic levels, my technical level or my operational level. At that aspects, one would have key stakeholders. The key stakeholders, meaning here this would be more the top executive layers, the senior leaders, the senior executives. We identified they mostly have value expectations. The things they express link to value objects. They link to the value drivers of an organization. While the business managers, functional managers, business groups and functional owners typically are more on aspects of the tactical level. They have more governance expectations. Now look at the business focus is also different. The business managers typically, they are concerned about improving operations, about performance management, control and monitoring, about business governance, about process innovation and management. While the executives up here, they were more interested about the business model, the value model, their revenue and profits, their cost cutting, business innovation and transformation, value measures, reporting, etc. So that's not a new thing for us. I mean, it's just the aspects of how we see these things connecting, that different stakeholders have different expectations. They link to different drivers. This links also to different objects. The object here is the strategic business objectives, while the business managers have the objects of critical success factors they need to achieve and the key performance indicators. Most of them are actually even measured on this very aspect. If you are going on the operational level, it's typically team leaders, team members, subject matter experts, process owners, delivery people, meaning the execution level. What is it that matters there? It's performance expectations. And here it's more about the measurements, the execution of aspects, the budgets, the quality. We see also there both internal and external influencing impacting the organizations. This was just to set a little bit the scene and the background when we will talk about business model and business architecture. One must understand the different structures and the different levels. So let's take an example of a business architecture view. Now, what is it a business model is concerned about? What's the perspective of a business model? The business model is concerned, and its perspective, it defines what we do in terms of the business competencies. It identifies core differentiating aspects, core competitive aspects. It also identifies the non-core aspects. Our studies show that most industries have over 80% non-core competencies, meaning non-competing, non-differentiating. It's about 5% that differentiates, 15% that competes, and over 80% that is non-core. Here comes an important aspect. Now, if my competency is core differentiating, also my process I do within it is value creating. Also my service it delivers is differentiating. This is a very important aspect, so we feel that are missed in the modeling disciplines in the market. The body of literature is full of it. It talks about it. There is not one strategy book, including Porter's, who doesn't talk about core competitive competencies, core differentiating competencies, and about business model. However, most in the market, most modeling disciplines do not consider these aspects. It's like it doesn't exist. It does, however, and this is, by the way, what we see in enterprise architecture, business modeling, process modeling, and even reporting to be the biggest mistake. I'm mapping 100% of my processes, trying to figure out what creates value and what doesn't. Not realizing even if I have mapped 100% of my processes, I still don't know where I'm unique. I still don't know where do I differentiate, where do I compete, and where is it that I have non-core I actually need to cut cost. Then we apply Lean, and we love Lean. I actually teach Lean at the university, or Six Sigma. I'm an old Six Sigma practitioner. So we apply the principles. Now what happens if I'm using optimization principles in an area where I am unique? Yes, I actually destroy more value than I create. Something goes wrong. In our modeling disciplines, and including, by the way, the BMM aspects of motivations, we are missing objects of value modeling. We are missing objects of where is it I differentiate? Where is it, what kind of disciplines do I use to identify my core competitive or core differentiating aspects? So, you see that business modeling interlinks with value modeling, because then I can identify how do I create value? How do I link it with my strategy? How does it fit with my scorecards? Because where is it I want to have real-time decision making? In the areas where I am unique. Where is it I don't want real-time decision making? In 80% of my business where I don't differentiate. Still, we do business intelligence projects and scorecards and measurements the old way. Very interestingly, we map all things to then figure out what do we want to report on. All studies support this. Over 90% of reports done in organizations, including even SAP reports, are not used in organizations. Why? Because we haven't identified where is it that they are unique, where, and to what does it link to what kind of processes, to what kind of services. This is what we do in LEAD. We are in the study and in the research of such advanced modeling and architecture disciplines. How does it link to performance drivers? How does it link to value drivers? How does it link to cost drivers? Where do you establish reporting for real-time decision making? Where would you only want measurements, and where would you only want monitoring? Just to make sure, yeah, it's where we are and where it's good. Then this links to aspects, both the business model and the value model links to aspects of my process model. Meaning, how do I execute? How does it fit together with my pain points? Here, my optimization potential, my transformation potential, my weakness clusters, also in engineering called bottlenecks, and it links to aspects of my continuous improvement. So these are the disciplines that we saw that happens around business architecture, supported heavily by the IT architecture, meaning the technology model perspective, defining how we enable it, links to application functionality, the data services, the platforms, the infrastructure, and established automation of it. Which all of this combined obviously defines my business model of IT. How good is it that IT creates value for the business? How good is it that we actually support the core competitive aspects and the value creation and realization aspects of the business? How is it we identify the non-core competencies of the business and enable cost cutting and performance creation and realization? How is it that our main systems can work with aspects of my pain points and bottlenecks to actually enable the business? Where is it we identify duplications? So, having had this is the study of where we are looking at. Now let's jump back to the one example I wanted to do, because we are also coming slowly to the area of where I am wrapping up. Let's take a look at back to the objects. I promised you I'll do one very detailed one with artifacts, with objects relations. Let's do it on the value objects. Why? Because this is the very focus of BMM. This is the very focus of Claude's wonderful group you guys have. So this is what we also wanted to share, some of our studies. And we don't see this conflicts at all. We have until now not found one area where we conflict with all the research and all the publications we have had with OMG. Well, there could be two things that could be mentioned. We wish they would be integrated among each other's, all the standards OMG has, but you see, that's wish thinking, and I know OMG thinks that same thing. We have very good contacts both to Richard and to Denis, and we realize also you guys wish that. So let's go into here. With these objects, how do we see these value objects right now fit together? So let me start from, this is what we call a model of understanding. I'm going to take you through an example. So this would be linked to measurements and reporting. I'm going to build it up slowly. So a company has a strategic business objective. The SBO you see here, the legend on the very left on the bottom. A company has a strategic business objective. In this case, it would be increased turnover. This can be broken down. Why? Well, if it's a company strategy, we all know that there will be multiple business units who also have certain strategies. So a strategy can relate to other strategies, but the one is a corporate strategy, meaning a directional strategy. Another one is a means by which I actually execute something. Then you would have different business unit strategies. They are all different. Do they all still support the corporate strategy? Yes. Is it different meta objects? Yes. But are they categorized into certain aspects? Yes. In this case, what's called a strategy. This can be broken down to what we call critical success factors. Some in the market also call these objectives. The reasons we don't call these objectives, we call them what actually the market calls it. It's like a KPI. A KPI could also be called a measure. While I do measure KPIs, a KPI is not a measure. A KPI is a key performance indicator. It can be used for measurements. It can also be used for reporting. Also a CSF, meaning critical success factor, can be used as a value measure. But it can also be used in a report. It's actually, here would be typically aspects between here is dashboards. Up here are scorecards. Down here are aspects, so we would have here the cockpits, the dashboards, and the scorecards in aspects of measurements and reporting. So I can drill down a KPI into a PPI, a process performance indicator. I could also break it down, the KPI, into a service performance indicator. I do realize this does not exist so much in the OMG group, but I mean, we all know this exists in ITIL and in COBIT and in multiple other methods and frameworks out in the market, including TOGAF recognizes the aspects of a service and a measurement. So in this case, we recognize that there exists a KPI. Can be broken down into a PPI, meaning a process performance indicator. That would be, in this case, we are talking real-time measurements. If we are going down here, one has to, according to the body of literature, has to measure it in one of these 5 areas: a quality indicator, time indicator, cost indicator, volume indicator, or an efficiency indicator. Now, all of these meta objects, this would be from the value perspective. I'm going to draw a line right now. They can be used of how it's actually used in value reporting, meaning the strategy is reported on in the enterprise. It's, by the way, it's also created there, so it's reported back to it. The reporting back is actually gone to the business areas, while the critical success factors typically fit to the business groups. The KPIs fit to the competencies of an organization. In this case, also I can relate a KPI to a resource or a role. Hence, it is very important not to see a KPI and a measurement the same. Because I can measure a PPI, I can measure an SPI, I can measure a KPI, I can measure a critical success factor. So measure is a phenomenon of what I do. In this case, I need a matrix to do it, a measure. So I can measure and I can relate a KPI to a resource and a role. Most of you in organizations out there that I'm talking to will have KPIs measured to you and personally. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. It can be related to you as a resource or role. It can also be related to the process, both the KPI, but if then broken down here, we're already talking about process performance indicators. Or it can be related to the process, to a service, or as a service performance indicator to the service. In this case, these would be the relationships to other objects. I realize most of organizations we meet who see this model say, well, we haven't done it this way, but we do a similar way. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. This is what we have studied the organizations do. I don't care what methods and frameworks say. We are not interested in that political game. This is how the market does it today. This is the relationships. By the way, this is how the objects can be related to each other. Can I relate a strategy to a process? No. I don't care. I do realize a method can easily do that, but it's physically impossible. Why? The meta object of a strategy is a high-level conceptual object. It sets the direction. A process is a very detailed physical object. There is no possible semantic relationship between these two objects. I realize you can do that in a model of putting it and drawing it. That still doesn't make it right. Hence the difficulty of linking strategy and a process, because it has to be done through the other objects that are just shown here. So if we link aspects of artifacts, that's the last aspects I want to show. If we link artifacts to this, here you would have strategy map. We all know that, and then our colleagues Kaplan and Norton, we've done the strategy map, and also, by the way, the balance scorecard. If I relate the strategy map up here, it would be to these meta objects. They could be, so these meta objects can be found in a strategy map. These meta objects could be found in a balance scorecard. These in a performance map, in a measurement matrix, in a business model, in a process model, in a service model, and the operating model. Now please note, wherever you have more than one object or more than multiple artifacts to one object, what do you think happens there? Yes, duplications of work. It's called distributed modeling and distributed architecture. Most of these organizations, all of these artifacts are used by different groups. They don't recognize that the objects reuse. And this is where the leading practice community has developed templates. Templates meaning artifacts of how to integrate these together and across each other. And this is my last slide I have for today, how they work together, and then I truly believe this has been more than too detailed for an easy presentation. Let's look at the artifacts and the templates for the integration. Here on the left you see the objects. It's the same objects you just saw before. The strategy, the objectives, the performance indicators, the value drivers. Then you have numbers in there. Let me explain very short these numbers, because I mean this looks as a very, very scary slide. I do realize that, but within it is really lots of work. Now a map, the number you see here, everything that is a number 1 is a map, meaning a list of things. Like a process map it lists the processes. The number 2, it's like a process matrix. In this case, this diagram here, by the way, a diagram is a matrix. It relates 2 different aspects together. So a process matrix would relate one process to other process, or one processes to different roles, or processes to data objects, etc. And then there is the models, which should not be a different or strange term, because this is exactly how OMG uses models as well. BPMN notations are process models, meaning the very finished artifacts. Please note that we do not do any artifacts around models. We do artifacts for maps and matrices. For the models, we have what the market uses, or we refer to like the OMG standards, or TOGAF, or ITIL, or COBIT. So in this case, let's take a look at this. We just discussed before performance indicators. In this case, I can categorize them by strategic, tactical, or operational level. Let's take a look here. Here. So I hope everybody sees my mouse. So the performance indicator is at the balance scorecard. At this level, I would have a 1. The 1 means that this is the natural object's home, meaning it's the list of things. If it's not a 1 in it, this is not where you can start to do the mapping. Why? Because it doesn't have a 1. It's not a map in it. So it must have a 1 in order that it's a list, meaning this is where the nature of the object would be found. In this case, in a balance scorecard, I can find a performance map. My performance indicators, I can also relate them, and I can put them in the model, meaning the scorecards. Now let's see how we can use this diagram. Let's go up. We know that because everything here in a balance scorecard, I could see also a strategy. So my KPIs are related to a strategy. My KPIs are also related to my objectives. And by the way, like mentioned, an objective is both a critical success factor, but also a plan is an objective. A forecast is also an objective. That's why objectives are such a difficult word. It's actually everything and anything. So also a budget is actually an objective, as defined in the body of literature. Anyway, let's go back to this. So it can also relate to the objectives. And I can relate my KPIs to reports. I could also see these objects that are in the reports in terms of how they link to measurements. And how do they link to my competencies means who has which report, who receives it, which kind of role is played on it. In what kind of notations do I find that very KPI here? So we say, where is this object found again? And where could it be reused? This is typically what we do in the leading practice community. Then we develop reference content around it that can be reused by the community members. Anyway, that was the idea of my presentation today, the introduction. I wanted to leave some good time for questions. So let me finish off with this and open up for some questions.
Thank you, Mark. That was a very, very interesting presentation, just like the one you gave to us months ago. So I appreciated the time you took. We don't have a whole lot of time for questions, but if people want to put questions in the chat box, I think Mike will read them off. And if we run out of time and people have to start leaving, basically what we can do is ask people to send any comments or questions. If they're of general interest and would benefit other attendees, please send them to the entire BMI mailing list, which I think is bmi@omg.org. And otherwise, if you have specific questions that you want relayed to Mark, you can send them to Mike at omg.org. Mike Narducci will do the dispatching. Mike, if you can see any questions right now, please tell us what they are.
Okay, I'll start. There's a question here. I really like what I've been hearing about object reuse and object classification. How could such a thing be used for financial transformation, business, and IT?
Yes. Oh, wow. What an excellent question. I'm going to make this very quick. If you would go on our page, you could actually go directly into it. You could then find the industry that is relevant for you. In this case, we will choose financial. I'm going to choose right now financial just to make this example of what the question was. So you could see the objects then relevant for it. In this case, we actually have here saying, what are the top strategic business objectives for finance? You could click on it here, and you could find such an example of a strategy map done within finance. What are the typical competencies? Financial strategy, measurements and reporting, account operations, meaning here you would then say, what kind of strategy under strengthen internal controls? I would typically have these objectives. Then these are the competencies involved fulfilling that strategy. So you remember I mentioned there's lots of reference content. Things like this, that is the part of what the community does. Also would be, and I don't want to go to more, you can click on it yourself, but here's the one on, for example, the KPIs of what are the typical scorecards in finance. So which would be the typical KPIs. So all of these principles that we have, so besides that it was showed on principles, the reference contents like SCORE or APQC are used and then actually applied there. Hope that answered the question in the quick version. Do we still have time for another one?
Okay, well this will be a lengthy lead up, so I'll try to read it as fast as I can anyway. OMG has shepherded some great modeling standards like UML, BPMN, and BMM, business model motivation, which have been used in isolation of the other. In a dynamically changing world of social media, cloud computing, and organizations quickly adopting to change through transformation and innovation. This requires more integration from an enterprise modeling perspective. Using some lead concepts, how could I cross-use the OMG methods?
Wow, what a good question. Oh, wow, I mean, but I guess this is the heart of what we wanted to explore. I can literally not answer this fast enough to say, because there is not an easy answer. I know from experience, because I know I've talked with Richard many times, I talked with Denis Gagner many times, that OMG is exactly trying to figure this out. I believe we solved it from a lead perspective in our modeling disciplines, because we looked at then the objects and how they could be reused across them. I also believe that same principle could apply for OMG. But as much as I know, this is exactly what you guys are working on, or am I stating something wrong there? Please.
No, so I'll jump in here briefly. Again, we don't have a lot of time left, but in the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force, we have been considering for a couple of meeting cycles now what we can put on our roadmap in terms of doing a better, for lack of another term, ecosystem of our various specifications, and how to provide, for example, a practical guide or some tutorials, or rework some of the specifications to find what the integration points are between business motivation model, value delivery meta model, business process modeling, case management modeling, decision modeling, and some other things we're talking about. So if you want to participate in this effort to help rationalize and integrate this better, Please, if you're not a member of the BMIDTF, join it and consider attending some of our other meetings. You can contact Mike. He's the one here with the simplest email address, mike@omg.org. That's why I keep using his as a reference point. Mike will dispatch your message to the right people, and we will get back to you as to how you could potentially help us find our way through this problem. I agree that this is a very good question. It's a good challenge, and we need to address it, and we intend to address it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. LEAD would not be the answer for that, because that must be solved internally. I believe we solved that for LEAD aspects, but exactly that idea is OMG thinking about as well. I mean, OMG comes from... Yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
You have to remember that OMG is an organization where the work is done not by the staff but by the volunteers. So here, that's my message: is anyone who wants to contribute to improving this state of affairs, providing more completeness and more integration of the specifications, should really join us and come help us do that work. Mike, is there another burning question, or can we close now?
There are quite a few, but what we can do, we can push out to the attendees the list of questions with some answers post-event. So,
right. Okay, so let's do that. Please share the rest of the questions with Mark and with the co-chairs of the BMIDTF. We will then answer the questions we can, and we will push that back out to the attendees, which we want to thank for spending an hour with us and listening to this very interesting presentation. I want to thank Mark again for the clarity of his presentation, and we'll close now. I want to remind everyone that our next meeting is the third week in June. It's the week of June 16th. The BMIDTF will meet as usual on Monday the 16th and potentially on Thursday the 19th of June, and this will be in Boston. Go to omg.org and look for the next meeting information if you want to participate in our work. You have Professor Van Rosing's information here on this last slide on the right. Thank you very much. Mike, if you have anything else to add, go ahead.
No, I think we're all set. We'll be reaching out to attendees, like we said, with some presentation material and some questions to answers. And appreciate everybody's time, and hope to see everybody in Boston.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Good that I can come. Have a nice day.